Now, there's a bit of spice added to the international community this week when US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi followed through on her promise to visit Taiwan. Needless to say, the Chinese communists were not that happy about it, and they made all sorts of threats about what they were going to do. And they've even gone as far as to fire ballistic missiles over Japanese waters and near Taiwan. Earlier, the feeble Joe Biden said he didn't want Pelosi to go, and that's no surprise to those of us who recognise the Biden family business has very close links to some of the communist hierarchy. Now, I have to say that I was a bit vexed about this because personally, I do not think any elected official should be bullied out of visiting a country by a third nation. That said, I'm genuinely concerned as to whether this was a needless provocation that could escalate already fraught global tensions. Someone who would have an informed view on this and joining me now to discuss the visit and what we can possibly expect in the future is Director of Defence and National Security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, Michael Shoebridge. Michael, thank you so much for your time. Were you in two minds as to whether the pre-visit announcements had done more damage, or do you think the post-visit conduct of China is potentially more damaging?
Well, Cory, I think announcing the visit and speculating about the visit of a US politician before it happened was a mistake. The first thing that the Chinese Communist Party should have heard about a visit was when Nancy Pelosi was speaking with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen. And as you say, democracies shouldn't look like dictatorships. Xi Jinping in Beijing can tell his people who can and can't go places, but no leader of a democracy, whether it's President Biden or Prime Minister Albanese, should even look like they're going to tell other politicians in their system or even citizens where they can and can't go. So that was a mistake. The visit itself was essential, and you can see that by how stridently Beijing has reacted. The last thing Beijing wants is countries, democracies like the US, Australia, and members of the EU standing with Taiwan and engaging with that democracy. Their plan is to isolate Taiwan so they can do whatever they want to it. So the visit was a necessary thing. There should be more of them.
Yeah, I agree that they should have gone. It was perhaps the pre-publicity that I thought was unwise. So we're at one there. But what do you make of my concerns about this could just infuriate China? They've got some internal issues, which I know you've commented on previously. Could this be the catalyst for an escalation in their objectives of taking back Taiwan?
I don't think so. I think they're on that aggressive path regardless. And I think it's driven by these domestic internal issues and arm wrestling inside the Chinese Communist Party. Xi likes to project an image that he's secure in his power, but like every autocrat, he has to worry continually, both about the population that he's controlling and about the people around him inside the Chinese Communist Party. So his motivations are about strident, aggressive nationalism. He doesn't need Nancy Pelosi to push him that way. It's like this idea that everybody else made Putin decide to go to war in Ukraine. Putin decided to go to war in Ukraine.
Yeah, ultimately that's true. Decisions are made by politicians and political leaders. They will justify them however they want to, and they have consequences for their people, of course. If you were to hazard an educated, intuitive guess about the time frame for China's intentions on Taiwan, is it something we should be imminently concerned about, or do you think this is a decade-long strategy?
Well, I think it's very hard to put a particular year or time on Xi's decision. I think he wants to do it as early as possible when he's confident enough it would succeed. And isolating Taiwan politically by not having people, whether it's the president of the Czech Senate and a 90-person delegation that visited a while ago, or Nancy Pelosi, not having them visit actually should give Xi more confidence that he can use force. So this kind of engagement undercuts his confidence. The other thing that will have undercut his confidence is that the kind of plan the PLA most likely had about Taiwan, that they were preparing for, looks just like Putin's failed plan to capture or kill Zelensky in Ukraine and have the Ukrainian people's will to resist collapse. That's exactly the kind of thinking that the PLA seems to have had about Taiwan, and they now know that could be a horrible error.
Okay, before I let you go, Michael Shoebridge, Nancy Pelosi had very strong words to say about how the US would step up and defend Taiwan. Is that just political rhetoric? Is the US well enough equipped to stand up to the Chinese military, which has been very expansionist in recent times, and particularly while they're distracted with what's happening in Europe and the Ukraine?
Well, Cory, I think before Beijing even gets to that calculation, they've got another problem on their hands. With the example of Ukraine, can China confidently take Taiwan even by itself without support from not just the US, but probably Japan and other partners like Australia? I doubt that they should be confident about that first question. And the PLA is still fearful of the United States military, and that's for good reason. Also, Xi knows he probably can't control escalation in that conflict, and a wider war would be hugely destructive. So I think the balance still favours the PLA trying to be belligerent and Beijing trying to isolate Taiwan politically. And I don't think we should just stand by and let either thing happen.
Yeah, we've got to stand up for ourselves, that's for sure, and voice our own rhetoric of disapproval if necessary. Michael Shoebridge, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us tonight. That's from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.